Good morning again, everyone. If I could ask everyone to take a seat ahead of this next panel. Thank you. If you could take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Now we move on to the nitty-gritty, if you like. We've been talking about all these complex regulatory issues, but now we get down to the meat and potatoes of markets. And it's my great pleasure and privilege that we have as a moderator this morning William McLachlan, a partner at HFW in London, who has become an expert in this area in recent years, and he'll lead a panel of senior players in the market to discuss not only where things are today, but where things may be going in the next few years, which could be quite exciting. So, William, thank you.
Yes, I just finished my prayers this morning.
My apologies, I missed the presentation.
So I have back immediately.
I'm scared.
I'm not yet.
First of all, we have the
the
presentation
specific-
on the steel market outlook for 2024 and the potential changes in trade flows. My apologies to Anne Nigem of Steel Prices Lead, CRU. Anne, sorry.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be at the Ship Recycling Forum 2023. Thank you, TradeWinds, for the invitation. So my name is Anne. I'm from the company called Commodity Research Unit. Just a quick introduction about ourselves. So we have a strong reputation across mining, metals, and fertilizer for the services that we provide that include market analysis, price assessment, consultancy, and events. So the purpose here today, I think I got invitation from TradeWinds to give a market steel market outlook. So here's the agenda for my presentation today. So I will, of course, I will start with the steel market overview, then followed by scrap usage in decarbonization for steel making. So why scrap is a very downstream for ship recycling? Within the steel world where I am, scrap is actually very upstream. It's considered as the key element for decarbonization for steel making, which I will explain in the next 15 minutes. And then I will follow with, I will end my presentation with a quick scrap market outlook. So yeah, here's the steel market overview in the last almost 20 years, and a bit of market outlook for the next 2 years. So at CRU, we believe that over time, the global steel prices will follow the 95th percentile of the hot rolled coil global cost curve. And of course, like there have times where we have seen the price and the cost being detached from each other, which happen on the very special occasions. We had seen it 3 times in the last almost 20 years. So the first time that was happened during the boom before the global financial crisis in 2008. The second time that was between 2016 and 2018, where the China supply reform was taking place. At the same time where there was Section 232 from the US that not allowing steel imports to go into the US. And that's when the US steel mills were having a great time, enjoying a very great margins then. And the most recent time that we've seen a very huge increase in price, I think there was a gentleman who mentioned like scrap price was at 600, and that's when the steel price was at 4 digits. So I think we had seen hot rolled coil price at $1,200 in 2010, I think 2021 and 2022. So obviously now we have the pandemic has ended, our life has returned to normality, travel is taking places, and so as the market behavior for the steel market. So the prices is moving closer to the cost curve, and we believe that that's where it should be if like fundamental remains. So in the next 5 years, we believe that the Chinese steel production have reached its peak, and we're gonna see a gradual reduction in steel production from China. However, that reduction can be easily offset by the increase in steel production in other parts of the world, leading by Europe, South Asia, North America, Russia, as well as Southeast Asia. And the small chart there indicate the growth in the, for people who might not be familiar with the steel industry, so there are two main routes to make steels. One is electric arc furnace, which use like ferrous scrap as the raw materials. The second one is blast oxygen furnace, where they use iron ore and metallurgical coal as raw materials. So going forward, we believe that the year-on-year growth for steel production from electric arc furnace will be much faster than blast oxygen furnace. Having said that, we believe that blast oxygen furnace will, in the next 5 years, will remain the main source of steel production. That will be account for almost 70% of the total world steel production. Even though we will see a gradual shift, the electric arc furnace proportion will increase its share by around 5% by 2027. So it go from 28% to around 32% into 2027. And because of the increase in the scrap from electric arc furnace, then of course there will be increase in scrap consumption for steel making. And the right-hand side chart is indicate where the steel, scrap consumption is going to take place. So Asia will be the biggest scrap consumer, followed by Europe and North America. So this chart, it might look a bit complicated. So this is, I took this from our emission analysis tool. So the y-axis indicate the CO2 emission intensity by mills, whereas the x-axis represent the scrap rate being used in the steel making. So just a quick key takeaway here is that the emission intensity of electric arc furnace steel making is substantially lower than blast oxygen furnace. And because I think the most carbon emission is actually taking at the raw materials processing, which is iron ore and met coal processing. So if we use scrap, we're actually saving on CO2 emission. And not just that, even within the blast oxygen furnace, if the steel mills increase the scrap rates, it's gonna substantially lower their CO2 emission as well. So because of scrap, within the steel world, scrap is the key element to decarbonization. So we believe that going forward, having the decarbonization in mind, steel mills will be moving forward to use more ferrous scrap in their steel making. And then obviously the scrap demand is going to increase. Let's look at the supply side of scrap. So the traditional exporters of scrap are developed countries, and we believe that this country, the scrap funds might slightly decrease over the next 5 years. However, with the technology and the efficiency improvement, this country will be able to increase the scrap rates. But then, because of the need for scrap for decarbonization in the steel making, so we believe that this country will also export less scrap because they will need to use more scrap in their domestic steel production. Whereas in other in developing regions, the scrap fund is going to increase. However, there might be some constraint with technologies to boost the scrap rate. So overall, we believe that the scrap fund will increase, the recovery rate will increase. So there will be also increase in the scrap supply from. And so this is the end. So for scrap, we have obsolete scrap, home scrap, and prompt scrap. So in the next 5 years, we believe that the home scrap and the prompt scrap are relatively flat, whereas the main increase for scrap supply will come from the obsolete scrap. And the scrap that is being taken from the ship recycling business are actually falling under the obsolete scrap. And we believe by 2027, the share of the obsolete scrap will increase to about 60% of the total scrap being available in the market. And the next chart is indicate where the scrap supply growth is coming from. And the chart, the last chart of my presentation is price forecast. This based on what's happening now. So we, with our view, I think we believe that scrap at the moment is still on the high side of things. I think it's around 280, whereas the mean should be about between 300 to 350. So going forward, we believe that the scrap market is in a better supply-demand balance. So that these scrap price will gradually reduce, and then will remain relatively flat until 2026. Then we're gonna see a slight pick up in scrap prices. So yeah, I have come to the end of my presentation for today. Thank you so much. I will be around at the conference, so I hope to catch up with you on the steel-related matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, for that interesting data there, and on the potential demand pool for scrap. And my apologies again for overlooking you just now. Now, jumping ahead to the market dynamics, that sets things up rather nicely for the panel. And I'd like to invite William McLachlan from HFW to the podium to introduce the panel. William, thank you.
Which one are we using, that or that? Thank you very much. That was very interesting. I think we will get the panel up and ask them to introduce themselves. So come on up, guys. And try and sit in the order of your pictures if you can. As Julian kindly said, my name's William McLachlan. I'm a partner at HFW, international law firm. I sit within our London office of our transactional shipping team. And I've been doing, I'm going to sit there, we're going to mix it up this time. I've been doing ship recycling since 2009, where I started doing it with Stephen Drury, who most of you know. And so, yeah, I've been doing this quite a long time now. Anyway, we're going to mix it up. I'm going to sit down and we'll try and do a bit more the sort of fireside chat thing that you see in various conferences. Whether it'll work, who knows?
I believe, yeah. You as well?
Right. Can we move to the other microphone? Thank you. Harry, do you want to kick off and introduce yourself?
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I don't know if you can hear me, but Harry Conrad Pickles. I work for Braemar. I've worked for 20 years in the recycling industry and fronting the recycling desk in London, and now more recently moved out to Dubai.
Rakesh Khetan from Virana. We have been involved in cash buying of ships since 40 years now, and we are headquartered in Singapore.
Hi, my name is Gaurav Mehta. I'm looking after Best Oasis Limited and Priya-Blue Industries. We are one of the largest ship recyclers in India and have been doing cash buying since 2012.
Darren Lepper, Director at Clarksons. Been involved in the industry for 40 years this year, and been with these guys along the route and the journey for many years to where we are today.
Good morning, my name is Wilfried Lemmens. I am Managing Director of the Royal Belgian Shipowners Association and equally the chair of the ICSA working group on ship recycling.
Excellent. Brilliant. Thank you very much, guys. I think it's fair to say that the last 12 months or more have been a pretty torrid time for ship recyclers. There's not been much to consume. As Dimitri said yesterday, for those who can be patient, it will come. The question is, how long is it going to take? We'll talk about that. Anne's presentation just now was informative in that, of course, for ship recycling to really hum, scrap prices need to be high, owners need to be convinced of the merits of selling their ship for recycling rather than onwards trade, and at the moment there are plenty of opportunities for older tonnage, for lucrative employment, and with low scrap prices, and we heard that they may be low until 2026 and beyond. it's a bit of a perfect storm, but we'll explore that. Hopefully it won't be too controversial, although the organisers have encouraged us to be controversial. All of this, this difficult market forces is overlaid with the increasingly complex regulatory environment, which we've talked about a lot. I know a lot of my clients, my ship-owning clients, are increasingly worried about how on earth they actually go about recycling their ships and not find themselves in difficulty with the regulators, with the NGO, etc. So we'll try and explore a bit of those themes too. And look, please don't be shy in asking questions. We have some discussion points, but we've got 45 minutes. We'd really appreciate some questions from the floor. It's much more interesting if it's dynamic. There's a microphone going around. I've been unclear if there is a Slido or anything like that. Sorry? It will come through on there. Don't forget to project your voice. Thanks. It says, guys. These guys can't read the screen, and I can see half of it. But bang your questions in. All right, we're going to kick off with the brokers, please, guys. The question I think we need to start with, and you two are of course much closer to the coalface than I am, is can you give us an overview of supply and demand? How do you see things panning out over the next 12 to 24 months?
I'll kick it off then. Look, fundamentally at the moment we're seeing the least amount of scrap coming into the market for 10, 12, 15 years. I think we've seen under 200 ships scrapped last year. We're on a similar projection for this year as well. And moving forward, Darren will agree with me on this one, we're seeing liner companies scrapping ships. But fundamentally speaking, dry bulk has now had another little recent boost. We're not expected to see, I think, almost any dry bulk scrap within 2023. And obviously tankers are getting a luxury of, should we say, inflated prices in the kind of shadow trade. So fundamentally, you're looking at containers propping up any form of tonnage coming through. All the other sectors are making decent money. And you've got an issue where you've got huge demand locally. You've got demand from the breakers in India. Certainly got demand from the breakers in Bangladesh, but they have restrictions now, as I'm sure has already been spoken about, but to do with the LCs. And Pakistan as well. All these countries are short of tonnage and have been for a long period of time. There isn't going to be that supply. Everyone has talked about this tsunami of ships coming, but it keeps getting pushed down the road. It was coming and then COVID hit, then it was coming and then the war kicks off with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to see that tsunami pushed back, I think, a lot longer than people were hoping for, because whilst owners are obviously making money, it's unlikely that they're going to be forced to scrap the ships. And the trades of which the older ships are in are less subjected to, should we say, the regulations that might have forced out a traditional owner to sell a ship for scrap.
Yeah, I agree completely with Harry. And I think what we're seeing is, I think Martin touched on it earlier in the sessions, that many owners are, before the ships are coming close to their retirement, should we say, are being moved around to owners that are out there, particularly the Chinese, that are taking a lot of the older tonnage away from the ship recycling markets at the moment, because the markets are dictating and the freight markets are solid. The container markets, I for one last year, I remember sitting here and was saying that yes, we're going to see a big supply, and I think this year will be the one. But again, markets dictated that actually that's not going to happen, and I'm looking now towards more mid next year onwards again, and we're delaying the inevitable. People are talking about the container ships. We've got a lot of new buildings in the next few years coming out. However, yes, the rates have come off quite considerably. They're still above pre-COVID levels. So these ship owners are still making plenty of money, and they're going to continue to trade whilst that occurs.
What do you think about, the big liner operators have cornered the market in terms of they've bought up large amounts of older tonnage. They've used their winnings from the COVID boom to buy older tonnage. Are those older ships going back into trade, or what's their prospect?
They're still trading.
No, but when the big boys are done with them for economic or environmental,
there's still clients out there. There's still buyers out there for these ships at the moment because they're making money. If you can make money, there's going to be buyers out there for these units. Obviously, we're going to have a big supply coming out the yards in the next few years, as I mentioned. So that would have a knock-on effect with some of these units. But I don't want to disappoint the recyclers in here who are rubbing their hands ready for tonnage arriving, it's going to still be a little bit delayed, I think.
Yeah, but when you say fundamentally speaking, less container owners are passing SSDD in the older spectrum now. We are going to see more containers coming. And yes, there is appetite for older ships, but they generally will require some form of trading life left in them. Otherwise, people are not there to put the investment in, not really fundamentally knowing where the container market is going to be next year. So I do think that you will see that flow of container ships. But you talked about liner companies. Liner companies are more likely to just scrap the ships than sell them off, and allow other people to trade them. The propping up will be liner companies selling ships for scrap. The kind of single purpose owners might not be quite so, should we say, willing to get rid straight away.
Okay. Rakesh, Gaurav, do you guys want to talk a little bit about your domestic market, your appetite for vessels, and your offtake and likely prices domestically?
Should I go?
Yeah.
The appetite is always there, and in fact, the domestic market has been starved of tonnages since quite some time now. The supply has been really short of expectations. Every time we thought that there will be, as Harry said, tsunami of supply, but the supply has been delayed, and I believe it will be delayed until at least second half of next year, because the markets are firm. And containers could be the first ones to come onto the scrap market. We are seeing some flow of containers and some flow of dry bulk vessels, but still it is not as required by the industry. So the market outlook in India is positive. The scrap prices would remain under pressure, but still the market outlook is positive. The prices would hold around the current levels. And Bangladesh and Pakistan have their own set of problems, where the letters of credit is an issue, foreign exchange is an issue, which we expect that the situation will ease in time to come. Bangladesh has eased to some extent, and Pakistan has also opened up slightly. But the problem is they have some huge debt obligations to be fulfilled next year. So it remains to be seen when they gear themselves up to repay their debts, whether they'll be able to allot foreign exchange for recycling business. So I believe it's a perfect balance. There has been short supply. Still the markets have been holding up around the 500 level, despite the market being starved of tonnages. So if the supply were to increase, the prices will definitely come under pressure, because even the global outlook on steel has been stated as a slowdown for next year. So if the supply increases, definitely the prices will come under pressure.
So from my side, I believe that India is going to be one of the most looked after market, because first of all, most of the yards are under Hong Kong Convention. So India will be, most of the owners will look into it first. So India would be one of the first markets to get full. Thereafter, Pakistan and Bangladesh. Bangladesh is also coming up with HKC. So the owners will go over there, but it will take some time for them to be comfortable with the yards. In the local market sense, India looks the best among all of them in terms of the economy perspective. I do see that the demand from Indian recyclers will remain quite high for the coming months and years, because the availability of tonnage is short. The only problem what we see in India is the low end markets like billets, rounds. These things are not being sold at the pace as it should be. So what Billu Bhai said is completely right, that when you will see some more supply, the prices are supposed to correct quite a lot, at least in all three markets, because neither in Bangladesh, neither in Pakistan, the local markets are doing well in terms of the end buyers. Like there is no real buying interest from the people who are going to construct or have new areas of road constructions, projects from the governments. Everything is on a slowdown. So this is going to be a bit of a tough issue. But India is faring much better in terms of economy with everything else. So India may be the market to look into for the next coming year.
I would like to add one thing. We should not ignore the emerging geopolitical scenario, because that may completely reshape and redefine the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll come on to that thorny subject in a second. I would reiterate our plea for questions. We feel a bit like ship recyclers up here. You're currently starving us of content. But yeah, we've got some questions. Do ask. No, still no questions. Wilfred, can you please talk a little bit from an EU ship owner's perspective about the ever-present question of capacity, SRR capacity, but also HKC compliant or genuinely HKC compliant capacity?
Well, as mentioned before, the market is quite favorable these days and next coming months for ship owners, except for container segment. But that does not mean that the world fleet is not aging. And it is estimated that in next coming years, about 15,000 ships will have to be recycled. So if you put that against the capacity of the ship recycling yards worldwide, there are indications that the ship recycling capacity will have to double worldwide. The European ship owners, it has been mentioned by my colleague Martin, where is our compass to go? Do we have to follow the Hong Kong Convention or the European Ship Recycling Regulation or the Basel Convention ban, or will it be one or a mixture out of those three? We don't know. So the message to Europe will be, please do not miss the train or do not miss the ship. Do not push us out of Europe, because then you lose the complete transparency what will be done or how the ships will be recycled. So that is the main concern of the European ship owners.
So the European the European Commission, and potentially to a degree the ship owners, are looking at the developments of the Hong Kong Convention with interest. They are looking at the work that's been done so far and the work to be done. And of course, a lot of the work that's been done so far has been done under the auspices of the classification societies. They've been the ones assisting with the drive of improvements in the yards and certification of said improvements. That baton's going to pass to the competent authorities of the recycling state. What impact do we think that's going to have? And does anyone, I mean, you guys as the ones tasked with implementing it, you're going to stop dealing with class, you're going to start dealing with local inspectors and things. How is that going to impact the standards?
I would like to ask my co-panelist, with due respect to him, why there is an air of concern if the ships are recycled outside Europe?
It doesn't work for the EU Commission.
No, but
I don't work for the Commission here, right?
Yeah, because he represents Belgian Ship Owners Association, and he said that they are concerned if the ships are recycled outside Europe.
Well, there are a lot of regulations coming towards us, and one of those is the environmental regulations that eventually, if a European ship owner does not recycle on a yard that is approved or is on the European list, then he can be prosecuted.
Yeah, he can be one or not.
But you should be making proactive efforts for EU authorities to widen the approval of yards.
You are
outside Europe.
Yeah, and you are completely right. So what we see now, and that the couple of last years, Europe was with a closed door towards negotiating with ship owners. We see now that more or less, or the door is slightly opening, and that we start communicating, or that Europe is start listening to the problems or the concerns of European ship owners, where we will have to come to a win-win situation for ship owners, ship recyclers, but also on social work conditions for the local workers. Also taking into account the environment, we have to come to sit together at one table and find a common solution. Otherwise, Europe I say it again, will miss the train. It will not miss the train, but it will miss the ship. And if Europe is missing the ship, it will face problems in the next coming years, decades.
I think it is high time Europe should take cognizance of the substantial improvements done in the Indian subcontinent.
I fully agree with you.
I think the problem we have as well, I think everyone's confused with what's right and what's wrong, what you can do, what you can't do, legal, illegal. There's so many different Basel Convention, Basel Amendment, Basel BAM, waste management, HKC, SRR, so many different things where if we could all get together, and maybe Will, you as a lawyer, this is your chance, is to get some sort of legal practice together where everyone knows where they stand, and it helps everyone within the industry. I know it's very difficult to get the European together with other countries, but there must be some way, because it's just so the confusion there at the moment around the industry, and just for ship owners as well.
But they've been saying this for 20 years, Darren.
All of them. We can start somewhere.
I do what I'm, as important as I think I am. Sadly, I do find the EU Commission and the UN, etc., they don't necessarily listen to me. I'm working on that. Yeah. No, but jokes apart, how are we going to bridge this fairly toxic gap between the NGOs on the one hand, us as industry on the other? And by us, of course, I appreciate there's a spectrum of views in the room. But we're all working towards a similar goal, and the politicians who perhaps are in the middle, and some, depending on whether those politicians are Bangladeshi politicians or Brussels politicians, they sit in a spectrum. But how are we going to bridge this? Are there any actors who perhaps can
the key initiative is the EU bridging India and potentially Bangladesh later on as well?
Yeah, for example, German Ship Owners Association, they put out a nice photos on their LinkedIn. I just saw it a few days back. So why can the other associations also not put up the photos on now what kind of improvements are being done, cannot be shown? So these are the things, these are the only ways I believe that you'll have a conversation with the EU, right? So the only way to keep, for example, there was an article in UK, Sun UK a few days back, where they put up pictures of a 2006 or 2007 time when ship recycling was happening in Alang. And this is how they show it, and today is showing that this is how the recycling happens. It's completely wrong media. So when we wrote back to them, they stopped replying and then they put it down. So this is not the way ship recycling is going to work. So everyone has to be a part of it, and we have to find solutions to ensure that everything goes well. So when you talk about doubling the capacity of ship recycling, this is not going to be sustainable for the future, right? So already we have so many yards right now which is empty, and everyone has invested heavily into the recycling yards. And when we talk about having more areas to recycle, this is going to be it's not going to be sustainable, because this is going to be probably one time that so many vessels will come for recycling. Thereafter what? Then again the yards are empty. So yard owners also are putting in a lot of effort to train the workers, to put in all the regulations in place. So it's not practical to have more of capacity. First, it's better to complete the capacity what we have right now.
Yeah, but Gaurav, you bring up an interesting point there, but do you not find it's quite funny you're now heading to a stage whereby all the countries, and we go back to Turkey years ago, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan hopefully as well, they're making all these investments like you just said, but the age and kind of profile of the older owners has completely changed in the last 6 years.
Right.
When we first, Darren will say the same thing, and Billy and Gaurav will know this as well, we used to sell ships from big major owners. They're not scrapping ships now because they don't want to scrap ships, but they are completely changing their whole rhetoric on funding, new buildings, needing to have a more modern fleet. So that kind of, the ownership structure of the older vessels is completely changing. And there's some phenomenal support from owners to yards in India, yards in Bangladesh now. There's been phenomenal support for yards in Turkey over the years, and now even other ones in Denmark. But what you're seeing is every owner will have a different way they want to recycle a ship. You're going to have oil majors who will not want to do it in a certain fashion. You'll have other oil majors who will follow their own rules. Each company itself has their own set of regulations. It's not just our shipping regulations. Some companies want to go above that. We've heard about the HKC+. We can talk about the shades of green. But the fundamental concern will be, If all this cost and investment goes into these countries, yet then that kind of 80 or 70% fleet profile of older ships is owned by owners that just don't care, it could become problematic. And I say that just as a point of view that, are we getting to a point whereby all of that older age ships that are going to be scrapped are fundamentally, potentially falling into a trap where they're almost going to be sold quietly because they have to be? Tankers specifically, we are going to have a shadow fleet we've got to get rid of. Some can be sold, some probably can't even be sold. What we do with those is another matter altogether. But what do you do as an industry who's trying to develop and grow itself with, ethical recycling policies, and then have a situation where most of that fleet profile, the owners don't necessarily have the same restrictions?
I would be interested. I mean, I'm amazed. My client base is global, although a lot of the questions on this subject are coming from North American and Northern European owners, a few upstanding Asian owners. I'm always amazed by how few of these clients, some of whom are very blue chip, have detailed and developed recycling policies or a knowledge of the regulatory framework. There is a very real gap between the reality and ship owners' understanding, and that's in the so-called developed world. If you look towards the new owners, which is your point, my question to the audience really, and probably not really one for the panel to answer, is how do we encourage the new owners, the Chinese owners, the Middle Eastern owners, etc., to pick up this baton, because they are the ones owning the ships that are going to be recycled in the coming decade. I don't know if it's a job for PIMCO or others, but there is some work to be done there for sure.
Well, it's like you say, it's discussion, isn't it?
And this is healthy, but there aren't many ship owners in the room.
No, there are at these events, sadly.
Yeah, but more and more we are working under what is called ESG, environmental, social and governance rules and regulations. Also our clients are starting to ask questions, what are your plans or strategy towards the end of the commercial life of the ship? What are you going to do with it? Also the finance world is asking questions. How are you going to cope with the between bracket old ships? So there, that market is pushing us also towards a direction where we have to go to a Hong Kong Plus convention, but on a worldwide level playing field, that every ship owner is following the same rules and regulations.
But do you fundamentally believe each owner has to follow the same regulation? Why, in the same way that certain shipyards here will call themselves a more premium to other yards because of the work in which they've done, some owners as well in the same rhetoric will want to recycle their ships in their own way. Yeah. And this is why these things don't ever really work of trying to get everyone together is, you can't have a uniform thing and then expect every single shipyard that's done a certain amount of work to say, right, stop there, let everyone else catch up. Because they want to keep developing. And they have an owner that says, well, I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it better. I want to
just go to Lucas's point earlier that, at least strictly speaking, if you are, after 26th of June 2025, if you are recycling a ship in India, India being a Hong Kong Convention state, party state, the shipyards, the recycling facilities in that jurisdiction should notionally at least all have at least the bottom. They should all be up to a certain standard. Exactly. They should all be certified, or they should not be in business. Without wishing to get too political, whether or not that actually happens is not for any of us to decide, but there are people in the room who do have a degree of control over that. But that is the hope. Of course, the serious players will have already surpassed that basis and will then be looking for further improvements. But I guess there is a hope that the floor comes up to push up those who are not necessarily, who don't care.
You do need a baseline.
The baseline is HKC.
Yeah.
There is no baseline at the moment.
There is no baseline, but the baseline should be HKC.
Yeah.
If you see the gap in the baseline, I'd like to take a few minutes. I may be stirring up the hornet's nest, but a question everyone should ponder on is the classic case of the aircraft carrier Sao Paulo. What happened to her? The Turkish recycler, after a much prolonged and unimaginable ordeal, the ship had to be finally be sunk in the sea. So does it serve the industry objective of environmentally friendly disposal of ships? See the gap in the regulatory authorities and what is being done on ground. A ship is not allowed anywhere. Even the seller didn't take the ship. The Turkish authorities didn't take the ship. The ship couldn't go anywhere. She had to be sunk. Does it serve the industry objective of safe recycling? And is it sustainable and viable? And do you think this is the only alternative solution in today's time and age that we can offer? Especially when we see an inexorable march of technology in the 21st century. So why do we resort to such practices? Just for sheer politics of the thing?
I think various people have to be careful what they say about the Sao Paulo.
No, but
there was a
the Turkish recycler bought the ship through a tender. It was an official tender. So how the tender was allowed to be floated? Of course, he is not here, and to be clear, we are no way related with this vessel. But then he has lost huge amounts of money for no reason or
what
rhyme.
can happen when the environmentalists get involved and when you have competing government agencies. You know, you had flag states.
It's not a question of they getting involved. They are over pedantic in their approach, and this is a big disservice to the industry. I sincerely urge the industry observers and regulators to be pragmatic, to observe, to be analytical and focus on finding solutions rather than being judgmental and quick to blame. You know, as an industry, I feel we are open to critique, but please don't criticize us. At least acknowledge the good efforts that all the recyclers have put in over a period of time.
Your point there, we have got some questions. A really long one, which I've been trying to digest.
No, but this is important to be addressed, and I thought this is the appropriate forum to move this point.
Absolutely, I mean, this is a talking shop. The questions come in, and it's long, I'm just trying to pick out the question. How can ship owners, and I suspect they're representative bodies as well, and flag state, etc., who have already ratified the convention voluntarily, take measures to push for recycling at Hong Kong Convention compliant yards now, and thus encourage everyone else to up their game? Did I make any sense?
Well, it does, but I imagine you're having to talk then to the regulatory body of each flag state and each country owner. And again, this is another one of these situations whereby you're trying to get that many people in a room to make a definitive decision over something that's already going to happen in 12 months' time. They're just going to say, let it happen, because they will.
Not to make a push for the professional advisors on this panel, but
well, as brokers, we can guide it, right? You can take, buyers can guide, brokers can guide. We can all take something to the table, but at the end of the day, it's their decision.
Sure.
You can say to them, you can do this, you can't do that. If they still want to do the can't do that, then you have to make a decision whether you can do it. But if it's fundamentally, are they allowed to sell a ship outside of HKC? Yes. And the problem being is, you can say to them, we don't think it's a good idea, it's not good for your company structure. And this is what comes back to my last point. If the owners have a certain already system in place, they'll follow it. But a lot of owners have one or two ships. And whilst we all wish that they would care for those one or two ships, they're like, we don't really want to go into too much detail on it, because they're like, we scrap a ship once every 8 years. Now, some owners go, we'll just sell it top notch, straight off the bat. Some will just say, I really don't have a policy and I'm not doing anything illegal and I'm just going to sell my ship. So, it's a difficult question. Yes, it's something that all of us up here can bring up with owners, but that is all we can do. We can bring up and advise. It's still for them to make a decision.
To what extent do you think, in your conversations with your clients, they actually appreciate and understand the situation, both from a regulatory point of view, which we've talked about a lot, and also from a reality point of view? I mean, the comment was made earlier from the Norwegian ambassador how few had been to Bangladesh and things.
Yeah, I think. Darren, you can go. But
there are, there's owners, and Harry quite rightly said, we as brokers and the cash buyers to us as well, we give guidance. We understand the regulations now that's in place. in addition with the EU regulations now as well, with an EU flag vessel, we know what you can and can't do. We pass the guidance over. It's up to them if they want to listen or not. The people that really are put in the middle of this are the cash buyers, to be honest with you, because ships are becoming problematic along the way, and sometimes the ship owner doesn't want to be seen to go into the final destination. This is where the cash buyers come in. So they have this added incentive and problem as well attached to them. But our guidance, we know what we can guide owners. We as Clarksons are looking as green as possible to sell, but the owners aren't always the same. Case by case scenarios.
You asked the question of what, asking what do we do with the owners? I mean, every owner is different. If they're a stock listed company, they predominantly will ask for a meeting prior to selling a ship, predominantly, because they will want to fundamentally understand options from A to Z. And there are, there was a discussion yesterday, I was sadly late in Singapore, but shades of green, and that's been something that's going on for ages, right? You can have an HKC yard and an HKC yard, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they do things the same way. Doesn't mean they do it badly either. There's also yards in Europe that get paid to recycle ships, and rightly so. Some of the yards are fantastic, but each owner will have a different structure. And I'll keep repeating it because that is the case. So you can advise it to them. A lot of them will have a structure in place whereby they know what they can and can't do. Then they want to understand the best way to monetize it, or the best way in which they can protect themselves so they don't get in trouble. So each will have a different perspective. They'll know we want to go HKC, how are we going to do it? We want to go EU only. And others know nothing, and they just want us to go in and pitch blindly and tell them what they can do, and some listen and some don't. But it's funny, the bigger the company, obviously they have a system in place. The difference that is changing is those big companies don't own old ships anymore.
And also, it's not, and
starting not to.
I'm going to promote Harry and ourselves here as well, as we do. But, it's not just ship owners, there's brokers out there as well, there's other agencies, banks, whatever, are not aware of the regulations or not aware of what is available for a ship owner. Yeah. So there's a lot of brokers worldwide now that become involved in the recycling industry, don't know the new regulations, don't know that you can't sell an EU flag vessel outside of EU approved yards. And that's where the problem comes into it as well.
And we see a lot of bad legal advice being given by brokers who are not necessarily qualified to give legal advice. I'm not talking about you two, who are also not qualified to give legal advice. Sort of saying, don't worry, just stick this clause in, it'll be fine, the sort of green recycling clause. Those clauses are fundamentally difficult to enforce. You've got to really work hard to be able to enforce those clauses. They're not a panacea to the problem. But I don't know how many owners actually really understand that. I think they say, well, I've got this clause, it's fine. Wilfred, you must see that from your owners. Say, well, I've got a clause that says the ship will be used for onwards trading. It's not going to be recycled other than in accordance with whichever regulation someone chooses to put in. Often it's completely arbitrary. Do owners come to you and ask questions about that?
Yeah. A couple of years ago, the knowledge about how to recycle a ship was minimum, and not that many owners were interested in how to recycle the ship, because you had the Hong Kong Convention, you had Basel, then you had Europe. So again, the compass was lost. What we see the last couple of months, more and more ship owners are getting involved. As I mentioned before, ESG, the financial world, clients, etc., are asking questions. So more and more the ship owners are getting involved, or asking questions: how do you have to recycle it? And they are becoming more and more aware of how to do it. But I would like to come back at what you mentioned before, and what was mentioned also in earlier discussions. Government is king, isn't it? So there is a huge responsibility, IMO, the Basel Band Secretariat, Europe, to come together and to make a minimum Hong Kong compliant, Hong Kong plus, whatever you call it, basis, so that for every ship owner worldwide it is very clear how to recycle your ship, and that for every ship owner worldwide there is a same level playing field. Otherwise there will always be ship owners who want to slip into the grey area, find the back door, how to abuse the rules and regulations, and that has to stop. again, I mentioned before, it has to be a win-win situation for the ship owner, for the recyclers, for the environment, for the workers, for all stakeholders, all parties involved. Otherwise, we are getting nowhere.
I mean, fundamentally, could you then not say, which is happening in itself, you know, we've now got probably 50 ship monitoring servicing companies, and there's a lot here in this room today. If you had it in the same situation whereby like a ship is inspected and comes out with a scoring system, you know, you could say we could have the same for all yards, but then who does it? Which politics, you talk about the politics, which politics are involved with that? You know, different companies will go into India and mark a yard very, very differently, and then not really give an explanation of why. Some will say this yard is not good, and you say, but they're allowed to recycle this owner's ships. You know, I don't want to start naming names of owners here because otherwise you end up in a different problem. But you know, there is a real gap whereby if you had a independent, shall we say, authority that could actually, you know, give you a scoring system and explain what does and doesn't happen, because that would be the only way where you're going to get clarity. But there will never be an independent body whereby someone is going to say that one person is fully independent, because, you know, what country are they coming from? You know, if you know that, like you say, from the beginning, an opinion on that system of what is a good yard and what is a bad yard.
I think we're also seeing this with surveying companies.
This is it. They also you all have a different opinion.
You've all got different yards that they approve and they don't approve, or reasons for that. And that again creates that.
But they could all do with coming together, to be honest.
Well, we saw it with the classification societies, didn't we? We all know that some HKC compliance certificates are better than others. It's always been a problem, but I agree that there's a very real dialogue that needs to be had there. An industry, an overarching industry body, or governmental or quasi-governmental agency needs to take ownership of this, and we need to come together on this. But it's very difficult for you guys to raise your standards and also encourage your peers to raise your standards if there's no uniformity in the way things are dealt with. I had a question for you, actually. To what extent, you know, obviously very large sums of real money have been spent on improvements in yards across the recycling nations, but there is a plethora of yards, and we've heard the numbers. You know, I know there is some consolidation in the plots, but to what extent do you expect consolidation over the coming years and smaller yards to drop out of the market?
Personally, I don't see much consolidation coming up in the market. Whatever had to happen has already happened. So most of the yard owners who are there are quite okay in terms of their working style. So even with smaller yards, you have those advantages which the larger yards don't have. So smaller yards you can, in terms of controlling the yard, in terms of the cost effectiveness is quite good. So the smaller yards will continue, and the larger yards will also continue. We don't see too much consolidation, at least in India, where our yards are. Whatever had to happen in the last few years has already happened. Whereas in Bangladesh and Pakistan, I'm really not aware how things happen over there.
In fact, they are catching up. Bangladesh yards, now we have few HKC yards in Bangladesh, and Pakistan is also working towards getting HKC certification for their yards. And as far as the money is concerned, it depends on the size of the yard and in what condition the yard was before they started the development of their yard towards HKC standards.
I mean, are there some yards, do you think, that the leap is just too great and therefore they won't bother?
Yes. Overall industry in the subcontinent, the leap has been really significant, especially in India.
The thing is that we don't see too many people nowadays coming to inspect the yards because the freight rates are doing quite well. So there's not going to be much recycling happening. But as and when things are going to change, I'm of the opinion that you'll see a lot more inspections happening on the yards, and all the owners will have their own different structure of recycling. But one interesting point, what Harry said, was that whether there will be enough owners to really look into the ship recycling or HKC, because most of the owners are going to be single ship owners or 5 ship owners, three ship owners. They're not going to care about where they are going to recycle ship, they are going to go for the top dollar wherever they get it. So that's going to be something to be seen in the coming days.
As far as the top dollar is concerned, even the owners who sell to a limited yards, the top dollar thing will always be there. So, but then the important thing is to get these small ship owners, small in terms of numbers, to get them on board and to get them to accept the HKC certified yards.
One of the things we talked about is the growth in Chinese ship ownership, and of course China used to be a major player in ship recycling. It is not. To what extent do we see them, if at all, coming back into the market in the coming years?
It's a wait and watch. Actually, one of their policies is reduction of global carbon footprint.
Which is where I'm going.
Which is why scrap should be encouraged. But due to local policy decisions, local factors, because a lot of things get influenced due to local conditions. So that remains to be seen when they will be given the nod to begin recycling of foreign vessels.
My understanding is there have been discussions recently in China with regards to lifting the ban of the import of foreign flag vessels for recycling. But significantly, there's a lot less yards now, recycling yards in China, than there was before. I believe it's only about 3 or 4, I think, if that, at the moment. But obviously they're big yards, and they can take a lot of tonnage at a time. But
there's a big domestic fleet that they're currently eating.
Exactly, so then they've got their own fleet that's going to go internally anyway. So I don't think there will be need yet for them to come back in the market.
They're fundamentally still worried about the fact that they was embroiled and caught up in the ban of importation of foreign waste, full stop. So what the problem is the government is concerned that if they lift the ban on allowing vessels in, why can't they now, import 18,000 containers full of plastic, which is what they were trying to stop. It wasn't shipbreaking they were trying to stop. This is something that happened so long ago that we've been over this, but they didn't ban ship recycling. They banned the importation of foreign waste, and they got caught up in it. And because it was a government policy, they wouldn't change it because they have certain strict policies then. And you can't have one rule for that and one rule for the other. I think it'll be very difficult to see how China in the short term will play any role, even if they wanted to, without creating a governmental issue.
And meanwhile, of course, they are playing a role, and there's another long question here about production of global steel, principally by China. They're producing the vast amount of it. There needs to be a policy change at the highest level to say we will use more scrap and produce less new, and thus drive prices of scrap up, which as long as they remain low, which I think is the point of this, the appetite for recycling your increasingly elderly ship is limited. Talk amongst yourselves.
Will.
There's a question over there.
Oh wow! Hello.
So if you look to the audience, you might see some questions.
Oh, sorry. It's quite.
You're looking over there.
We're here to help him.
Sorry, I do apologise. I was trying to talk to the panel.
I think having touched on it earlier, the sort of dark fleet. What is going to happen with this? Because cash buyers. It's a US dollar trade. What's the scenario for people involved in? Those ships are going to be dealt with. I mean, we just got a second one that's afloat in the Pacific, and these ships have to be handled. What's this?
It's a real tough one, right? I mean, as a publicly listed company, we have certain policies in place and checks that we have to undertake before we can make a decision of whether we can or can't get involved in any asset. That's not just shadow fleet. That might even be, dealing on a decent second-hand ship that's got absolutely nothing to do with any shadow fleet. We have checks in place that we have to follow, and I'm sure many other companies do, and certainly lawyers do. Just from the onset. It is a big issue. What are we going to do with it? And fundamentally, I don't think people yet have the answer.
No.
I mean, how can you have an answer about you've got? And this is not necessarily my company's opinion and not necessarily, the opinion of the industry, but how do you deal with it in the simplistic basis that if the vessel and the owner is not sanctioned, maybe you can help me out here, Will, on a legal perspective, paper-wise, dollar-wise, it is clean. But is it clean? Because then you'll say, well, it carried a different cargo.
Look at what trades it's been.
And then, you know, trying to find out then fundamentally what trades it's done. Did it carry a cargo that was under the cap? It's very hard for us to have instantaneous answers to all these questions. And it'll be a massive minefield for the cash buyers moving forward. Brokers, definitely, but cash buyers will see a hell of a lot more. So yeah, there's going to be inheritable risks that it's going to be very difficult.
You're going to see the emergence of a shadow market. You know, you've got to remember that the ship recycling nations, the bulk of them, are not subject to UN, US, EU sanctions regimes. We don't need to go into that today, it's far too political. But, you know, I appreciate that the big cash buyers in the room, all of whom have US nexuses, can't possibly be trading in ships that have questionable histories. But there are plenty of people out there who will trade in them, and I guess it's a question of whether there are yards, ultimate end buyers, who have the appetite to take these ships on, assuming they always do so within the confines of the law, as applies to them. But it's going to be a real problem. And before we get there, we are going to see, I'm almost certain we're going to see a terrible environmental incident with one of these ships, which frankly should already have been scrapped, and is, you know, it's only a matter of time before something happens, and then the world is going to be forced to deal with it. And then you have the question, well, how do you scrap that ship?
Well, this is the thing.
Which is dead in the hands of the international.
That's what I was going to say. Well, then you're coming to the added scenario of where is that ship going to go?
And it's not one.
No.
So yeah, it's a decent question, but I think the answer right now is no one really knows. If someone else in the room has an opinion on that one that they want to share, I mean, feel free. But I mean, how can anyone know? Because we haven't had a situation like this for many, many, many years.
We've never really had a situation of this scale. I mean, there have always been owners circumventing sanctions, Iran, Venezuela, etc. But that was a relatively small number, and a very small number of vessels and a very small number of owners. This is in a different order of things. It's going to be a problem, and for everyone involved, as your friendly neighbourhood lawyer, all I can say is, for goodness sake, do your due diligence and make sure you know what you're buying and what it's been doing, because it will come back and bite you in the proverbial if you buy something you shouldn't do.
Sorry, can I just a quick follow-up? Sorry, just a quick follow-up on that. Do you think it's possible that, given the safety aspect and the danger it poses to the environment, there could be some sort of clause that some government will give? These ships will, even though they have a patchy history, you can recycle them for the greater good.
Well,
so the OFAC does say that for environmental basis that but you still have to apply for a license, and this license could take anywhere between 1 month to 9 months or probably a year. So this is a bit of a trouble, but the OFAC does give you an opportunity to check for a vessel which is having an environmental pollution or can have a cause of environmental pollution to apply for a general license, a single time license, and basis that you can work on such ships. But to do all this is quite a Herculean task, so I'm not pretty sure if some people would do it unless you have a very strong background. So.
And then you've got to deal with your bank. So you may get your license, but your bank may still say it's too rich. They don't want to do with it.
And this is for OFAC sanctioned ships. And ships which are not sanctioned by OFAC, that remains a question.
And the vast majority of them are not sanctioned by OFAC.
Yeah.
Very few are actually individually
But they still have engaged in dark trade.
Yeah. Last question?
There's one at the back as well.
I am Darvashani. Actually, I am confused. When I came to Singapore, I was having different perceptions, but in last 24 hours, lot of questions going on in my mind. Yesterday we heard lot of words: HKC, beyond HKC, HKC plus, USRR, HKC plus U. Now today morning, in the regulatory session, we heard different opinion from the regulators, like BIMCO have different opinion. Basel has given their opinion what to do with the Basel. IMO has given their stand what will happen after 2025. Now we're looking at the market dynamics. Okay, what ship recycler has to do, or when the players like Cashfire or the brokers, once you buy the vessels or arrange to sell the vessel, whether this terminology, how important role it plays for buying or selling the vessels from ship owners. Secondly, being a consultant, what message we can convey to the client or the ship recycler that under present scenario, whether they have to invest further for the development, because the systems is not clear whether we have to follow HKC plus, beyond HKC, what system owners is asking. HKC, if properly interpreted standards, it says everything. You don't need any further standards. Okay. Because yesterday Mr. Julian said there are 6 pages related to ship recycling facility, but in support to 6 pages, there are 60 pages of the different guidelines. Okay, so if we study properly this 60-page guideline, we don't need any standard. So just a question that what this, all of you are playing an important role in the market. So what you think that how the market should be or what their expectations ship owner in terms of these requirements? Thank you.
Can I turn that back onto yourself as well a bit, I'm afraid, because having going to the yards down in Alang, and we had this confusion, like I brought up earlier, we don't know where we are to an extent, we know roughly what we're doing. The yards, majority now, as Gaurav and Brewer said, are HKC approved. Now, I've been down there, and I can go on one yard that is exceptional. Next door, it's an HKC approved yard, but it's like, oh my goodness. And you go with clients, you take owners, I have taken owners down there to see some of the yards. And we then have to justify why you sell to that HKC yard, but not that HKC yard. The proof's in the pudding, you can see. And that's not a reflective of you as the recyclers, who I know have pumped a lot of money into the system to upgrade your yards, but I can see the difference. But it's an HKC approved yard. Now, where do you? We have owners that will only sell to certain yards, and that is it. They'll limit their yards. That's the end of that. Again, I'm sorry to go back to the surveying companies that approve yards. Different yards are being approved by different surveying companies. That's the confusion side of it as well. We were involved very recently with a major European liner company that could have sold these vessels to Indian HKC Recycling, decided to put the vessels back into EU flag, and we subsequently sold to Turkey because they wanted to do the right thing under EU company, so a registered company. So we go back again, owners are case-by-case scenario, ships are case-by-case scenario, HKC yards are case-by-case now as well.
So you've got to do your homework. I mean, as an owner, you've got to go to the yards, you've got to look, you've got to make your own assessment, you've got to employ a surveyor, project manager who you trust and can work with, a broker who you trust and can work with, a lawyer, ideally, to tell you how the regulations work. But ultimately, you've got to own it. I think we said that we ended this time last year with this, but you should end with it again, and there's more questions coming in now, Julian. One more. Asif did put his hand up earlier.
Thank you. My name is Asif Rahman. I'm a shipbroker at Howe Robinson. Just wanted to touch on 2 points Harry and Wilfred mentioned earlier. As Harry said, the composition of the ship ownership of the older tonnage has changed considerably. If you just look at the dry fleet, 80% of the owners now is in the Far East. And it's just too fragmented for us to have a discussion to say there is awareness of the ship owners to come for green, to do the right thing. Because by nature, unfortunately, ship owners would always go for the low-cost option, unless they are forced to. If you look at the BWTS, when it came into play, it was not a debate about which BWTS to go for, is it the right thing to do or not. Shipping has the instruments to implement regulations through flag and class. It's just about having a regulation that is uniform and then implementing it. And that brings my question is, what can be a possible roadmap to have that discussion instead of having EU versus HKC or ship recycling yard saying that a LR class yard is better than an NK class or arena class. Instead of that, what could be a roadmap towards discussion with IMO that this is a unified regulation, every ship has to come for green recycling. How can you help us to implement it?
Flag state.
Flag state, classification, or?
Yeah. Flag state and the recognised organisations is the answer to the question. That's back to the IMO, isn't it? And to get their member states to start taking it seriously and enforcing it.
IMO is doing it already, I guess.
Yeah, they've started the process. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Please, round of applause to yeah, thanks to them. A lot of food for thought there. And talking of food, outside, back at 2 o'clock. Thanks a lot. Thanks to Will.